Well, I think let's get real. One of the things that young people want to know and understand is themselves. And so identity, who am I, is a really critical question.
As students in Montgomery County Public Schools, we have seen firsthand how our identities, and more importantly, the identities of our peers of color, are addressed and represented in the school setting.
The multiple and intersecting identities of students often have a much greater impact on their educational experience than schools realize. Race, gender, sexuality, and socioeconomic status all have a direct influence on student engagement and their ability to learn in different scenarios.
The question now is, to what extent do school systems across America acknowledge these intersecting identities? And how does that shape students' educational experiences?
Many years ago, I began to use the term intersectionality.
When I studied Chicana feminism, I learned the word intersectionality. And it is the idea that social identities, systems of oppression, and group identities intersect to create a whole that is different from the component identities.
Various axes of inequality, like race or class or gender or sexuality, don't exist separate and apart from one another, but that they influence one another.
And so when we think about trans women of color and the amount of people that are murdered simply because of who they are, if you're not doing intersectionality, then you're part of that violence.
One way to ensure that students' identities are represented in an intersectional way is diversity among teachers.
So our workforce is not as diverse as our student body, and we are definitely working to try to increase diversity on our staff.
In the last 3 years, we've actually seen new teacher hiring for people of color up by 11.5%. And that's a really important step for us as we think about providing students with access to people who look like them.
People talk a lot about having role models. And role models are important, but it's role models for everybody, not just for students of color, to see that people from different backgrounds have certain different knowledges that they can impart. And it's not only people who look a certain way who can provide the knowledge.
Teachers are in the classroom every day, day in and day out. They're learning, they're seeing some of the best examples of success. Similarly, I think we need to get out of the way and let teachers innovate and lead more than they currently do.
School systems must also consider how a student's background and experiences prior to kindergarten can be a part of their identity and directly affect their school career.
A wonderful county with tremendous services and excellent school system, but in order to take full advantage of that system, oftentimes we need to remove or eliminate certain barriers because the playing field or the educational field is not equal for everyone.
One of the biggest differentiators, I think, is because school requires certain kinds of skills, and it rewards certain kinds of skills. It rewards verbal skills, it rewards writing skills, it rewards cooperation, all of those kinds of things. So students who have had exposure to those kinds of things, students before they come to kindergarten, that by the time they come to kindergarten, there can be a big gap. That then affects learning going forward. That was kind of how the Head Start program came into being anyway, was really the idea of giving students who might not have these opportunities within their family, opportunities to start learning early.
The people closest to the problem are the best positioned to solve for them. Communities need to lead, and we need to get out of the way. I think it took some time for us as a country and as many communities to get there, but I think it's really important.
Some argue that all students should be treated equally and be provided with the same resources. In reality, schools must consider that students' intersecting identities change how they are affected by different issues and necessitate a more personal educational experience.
At least like a kind of primer in race, class, gender should be required for everyone, because no matter what kind of work you go into, understanding how different identifying factors impact people and their past and also their sort of life outcomes, you could pretty much imagine how that would be important to like every field of study, right?
I think when you combine the learning that you have with the experience that you have, it leads to different kinds of questions. It leads to thinking about things in different ways. And I think if you make both life experience legitimate, a legitimate area for people to talk about, as well as kind of the material that's in the book or the material that's been in other books, then you have an opportunity for really a rich dialogue, and students can learn a lot from that, and they can learn a lot from each other.
America was founded on the principle of equal opportunity. Our values of independence, freedom, and justice have driven the accessibility of programs aimed to fulfill our complex government. These motivations are especially evident in the field of education. Public education has been mandated by the government for every child. This proactive work has drastically shaped the socialization of past and present students, aiming to equip them with the knowledge and skills to survive in the future, fulfill their civic responsibilities, and make them contributors of a greater society. It is up to the public to assure that our innovative system is continuing to challenge and support each individual in an equitable setting. Our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., is the center of policymaking, innovation, and most importantly, social change. Ironically, the capital has been the source of much controversy regarding their system of public and public charter schools. Charter schools rose in prominence during the late 20th century as an alternative model for the traditional public schools, and they are free and open to all. The system allows parents or guardians to have increased choice over where their child attends school. However, the admissions processes and varying quality of education between schools has led to concerns of inequity. Still, for many hardworking families in America, charter schools promise a high-quality education at an accessible level.
Getting into a high-quality school, it literally is winning the lottery.
We applied to 16 different schools, 4 of which were independent, 2 of which were in boundary for DCPS, the remainder of which were charter schools, and we got into 1.
In D.C., 50% of public school students are enrolled in the district's charter schools, a select group admitted through the lottery process. Yet, what about those left without opportunity? D.C. is moving in the right direction, but as a nation, we must work towards promoting the dream of equity.
The lottery system was designed to create equity. Inherently, those who choose to actually apply for a lottery, it's biased. And those are more active parents, et cetera, et cetera. It's so valuable to have a school in your local neighborhood. You're not bussed between places. You can actually connect with your teachers after school, connect with kids after school.
We have a situation where we have charter schools and we have a lot of choice, but not located in the areas where students are living. This is a problem in traditional public education within DCPS, where the best schools, the highest quality schools in DC, are not schools within the poorest neighborhoods.
The lottery system in DC is a prime example of how the DC public schools work to assure every child an opportunity within the public and public charter systems. However, interaction between public charters and traditional public schools has manifested into a competitive environment.
What's happened is that charters create, and these privatized situations create winners and losers, when our responsibility as public school teachers is to help every single child.
Integration won't just happen. We can't just hope that we throw open choice to everyone and that that integration will result, because most of the evidence here in this country and internationally suggests that in many cases the opposite will happen.
Assuring equality for every child entering the system, regardless of their background, is vital to reducing the opportunity gap.
It's been really fascinating to see how charter schools have taken on a role, and I believe a much needed role in the district, of providing different opportunities for students beyond just what their neighborhood schools could provide.
One awesome thing about living in the district is a really strong social safety net. And I think areas where we can grow is we've got a lot of things that are great for families, and we just need to work as a city government and as agency heads to make those more accessible to families.
Especially at a younger age, parents play a crucial role in their child's education. Previously in American history, education has shown the potential to suppress marginalized communities, and it is up to DC and the federal government to take action in providing a high-quality education for all. DC has been a trailblazer in their approach to education, and the system is working tirelessly to meet the needs of the students across all socioeconomic brackets.
There is a real danger that charter schools and other schools of choice, magnet schools included, can end up creaming those families that have the most access to information. And so that's a concern. I think one answer to that is to make choice universal.
Although DC has made strides to improve their education system, inequity is still ever rooted within the public and charter schools. Through our exploration over the past few months, we've observed the merits and shortcomings of this complex system and its impacts on the families, communities, and generations to come. For future students in DC and throughout America, our government must continue to minimize the opportunity gap and increase accessibility,
allowing for a more adaptable environment for all Americans.
Deadly and violent weekend in Baltimore,
with the most murders ever through the first half of the year.
One shooting after the other, making for a violent and deadly 24 hours.
Several shootings from the weekend where 2 people have died.
Shooting deaths and homicide in general in the city are up rapidly.
In some neighborhoods, residents say the shootings never seem to stop.
RT's Simona Rosario is in Baltimore with how residents are taking the issue into their own hands.
My son and I were having a conversation last year. He was saying that the murder rate in Baltimore at the time was higher than it's ever been. And I just got angry about it. And I was on my way to work the next day and I was still mad. And I realized that because I was so upset, that must mean that I was supposed to just do something about it and not just be mad. I guess I was in some kind of mood because all of my coworkers were like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, man, I think we're going to have to call a ceasefire. In February, May, August, and November, there are 3 days where the entire city is making a vow to one another to just not be violent and to celebrate life. It is a self-determination movement, and so that means that people determine for themselves how they want to be involved.
A group called Runners for Justice decided to do this event here, and it's a run, walk, bike event and some community art and letting folks be in nature and exercise and be healthy in our community, and also do some artwork, so doing things that are peaceful.
The ceasefire it's a movement in Baltimore to reduce the murders and reduce violence, and it's about community engagement. It's about getting groups and people from the different communities to kind of step up and create events in their communities to build peace, to build unity, and it's also asking people just on a personal basis to be more peaceful and to be more intentional.
Fariha and I are two members of Baltimore Rising, which is a nonpartisan organization, and our goal is to increase civic engagement across Baltimore City. And today we've decided to specifically focus on youth because of the extreme power that young people have.
Kids between the ages of 16 and 21 are supposed to come here today to register, to learn about, people who are running for office today, to learn about how to tackle Baltimore's most pressing issues. And so we just want, everyone to come here today and just have a great time. There's going to be some food, some fun, some workshops, things of that nature. Well, it's important because the youth are ultimately the future of Baltimore, of Maryland, of this entire nation, of this entire world.
Right now, we are hosting a free breakfast for BOB, Band of Brothers. The organization started when I first got in. We were looking for our missing women in DC. Since then, we've been going uphill. We call her Mama Ceasefire, Erica Bridgeport, who put together such an illustrious organization to kind of combat the violence here in Baltimore City. The ceasefire is just to get a general message about, getting everyone to put down their guns and get into more productivity things, proactive things in their community. Kind of offsetting or kind of deflecting with the breakfast. We're giving away free food. Who wants to fight or, shoot during a free food event, right?
So we use today as an opportunity for kids to come, get a little makeshift ceasefire passport. They'll get it stamped at the different stations that they go to throughout the day, and that is their contribution to peace in the community. I got involved because it was important for me, for my children, to grow up in a community where violence is not the first thing that they have to think about. It's important for other communities to know what Baltimore is doing, so that you don't just see on the news, there's so many murders in Baltimore, there's so much crime and violence in Baltimore, that you actually get to see events like this. You actually get to see people coming together that may not look alike, but they're coming together to celebrate life and to be a part of something that's bigger than the violence.
Moms for Action has a national project called the Mother's Dream Quilt, and we wanted to bring it to Maryland, and we felt like this Mother's Day ceasefire weekend was a good place to come. It's a project where mothers are working together with gun violence survivors to commemorate those who have lost.
His favorite color is blue, and his nickname was Blue, and he said it stands for the beginning of something new. His name was Yes, I'm making a quilt today in his honor to remember him today. He the first one that made me a mother. It was the best thing. I love being a mother. So it made me feel good to honor him, by talking about him, sharing the story, especially today about doing this quilt, because I know that wherever he goes, they're going to know that his spirit is there.
Baltimore ceasefire could be declared a success. It's now been 3 days since a life was taken in the city.
It's important for us to remember that even though we have mayors and there are various different political officials and all of that, at the end of the day, I go home to my community. I don't go home to the mayor's office.
The other thing that the ceasefire does is really humanizes the violence in Baltimore because they share the names, they share the photographs whenever someone is murdered, so that it's not just a number, so that we take a moment to pause and reflect on each person's life that's lost.
And it's really just a community coming together, showing an example of what it looks like, for us to not just live communally in a peaceful environment, but for us to foster the kind of neighborhood community narrative that you don't really see commentated on when people talk about Baltimore City.
It reminds people of their own personal power, because a murder epidemic feels like that is something that's just so big, there's nothing we can do anything about, and especially one little person can't do anything about it. But the movement gives everybody something to do, even if they feel like it's a little thing. And so it reminds people of their own personal power, but then you get to see what power looks like when we share it, like all together at the same time, and how beautiful that is and how much we can actually get done, because these weekends are just filled with like the air in the city is magical. So the reason that it's Baltimore Ceasefire 365 is because all year round we're doing work to help people think differently about how we respond to conflict, but even how we respond to murder, that we don't just look at it and go, oh, that's too bad, condolences to the family, and just go back to something else we were doing, but to really respond to it, that you take it personally, like, oh my goodness, this is happening in my city, what can I do to help heal this thing? And so we're not just saying that it's a 3-day thing or that it's a thing that's going to magically cure it. So we're going to keep calling ceasefires until we feel there's not a need to call a ceasefire anymore.
I'd say the most challenging part of my job is not knowing what to expect.
You may see things that most people aren't normally seeing in terms of injuries and things like that. You see people in some of the worst situations of their lives.
Unfortunately, from time to time, we have to tell families that their loved ones aren't coming home. To me, that would be the hardest part. We show up here first thing bright and early in the morning. We do our apparatus checks, so we make sure our equipment can function properly so that when we need it, it's not a hesitation or question that it'll work.
I'm on the second half of working 48 hours straight, and I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, and I don't get off work till 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
We run calls throughout the entire day. We do have opportunities to train on our own and research and study for promotions or work with recruits.
I'm a firefighter, paramedic. I'm the paramedic on the shift. What that means basically is I have the most medical training of anybody on the shift.
Well, this station 16, Silver Spring, it has an engine with 4 personnel, a truck company with 3, and an ambulance with 2. All of the units here can respond to Prince George County as well, as we have an automatic aid agreement with them. The thing that sticks out here at the station the most is probably the camaraderie.
You see a lot more tradition, a lot more pride in the work you do.
There is, kind of a sense of taking care of the station and the area.
It's a tight-knit group of guys that have been working together for a long time, and they know their job well.
Everybody just gets along great. Love the people you work with. It's just a great atmosphere.
So it's an honor to work here.
A lot of different people all in one place. You have commercial buildings, like all the stores down the street, and then obviously it's a majority residential, but there's that.
We had one guy who was working on doing street repairs, and he actually had a heart attack and went to cardiac arrest. We went to the scene and we performed CPR and actually worked him for quite a long time, for I think almost half an hour total. 6 months later, he walked into the fire station, and I hadn't really heard anything about it. And he came in and introduced himself and thanked us, which was pretty cool because kind of didn't really even expect that.
It's not always easy, but when the rewarding moment comes, you appreciate it.
People, you can tell a lot of times really appreciate it, and they're very thankful for your help.
I joined the fire department to help people. There's a lot of really good training opportunities, and it helps you in everyday life when you're not here at work.
The only reason I got into the fire department is because my dad and my brother, my great-grandfather were all firefighters, so I continued, I started out as a volunteer when I was 16, and then when I turned 21, I got hired. And I've worked here for about 7 years now. I'm the only one in my family to be a career firefighter, which is, it's a good feeling. I like what I do, and honestly, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
In the cities, in the towns and country, we work together. We are many races and religions and nationalities. We are the men and women of America. We share our many races and religions and nationalities, and we come out the people of America.
American history is defined by immigration. The first people to migrate here was in the 18th century, with British colonists seeking economic independence and religious freedom, and African slaves forcibly brought to work. Since the colonial era, people from all parts of the globe, from Ireland to China to Mexico, have undergone treacherous journeys to seek a better life, and continue to take it today.
3,000 migrants from a Central American caravan have reached Mexico's border with Southern California.
We need a wall built fast, fast. We have to protect our borders. We don't have borders, we don't have a country.
And we have been working for weeks with our colleagues to try to find a compromise on immigration. This is a topic that our country has been debating for 13 years.
The current political climate has led the issue of immigration policy to be a controversial one. But what is undeniable throughout this discussion is that immigrants have played a major part in the foundation of America and continue to mold American culture and economy. Immigrants have always been here and will continue to be here in some way or another. America was built by immigrants, by people, by hard manual work, by dedication, or perhaps external force. I think this is particularly visible in myself and in Silver Spring, Maryland, the community I'm fortunate enough to live in. According to the 2010 U.S. Census, Silver Spring's population was 27.8% Black, 26.3% Hispanic or Latino, and 8% Asian or Pacific Islander. In many ways, we are a city made up of diverse cultures, stories, and ideas. We are a city made up of immigrants.
My name is Polly Budak, and I am 48 years old. I am an aspired writer, and I was born in Cambodia. In 1975, a war happened. It was a civil war between the political communist regime called Khmer Rouge they marched into the city on April 17, 1975. And the objective of the Khmer Rouge was to get rid of all the educated citizens. After the war, there was only 4 family members left: my mother, myself, and 2 sisters. When we escaped from Cambodia, we had to go through the Thai border to get to the Thai refugee camp, and that's where I and my family enlisted ourselves to be sponsored over to the U.S. by my brother, my elder brother, who was already living in the U.S. before the war broke out in Cambodia in 1975.
My name is Jordan Bondo, B-O-N-D-O. I was born in Central African Republic, and I am 18 years old. Like in my country, the elections is kind of different than the U.S. Like when the president becomes president, like the president don't want to like move after the new elections, you know. So usually what happens is the next person who's supposed to be president comes in with a bunch of rebels, and then they take over the power. Well, since that happened, we had to move out because my dad worked for the old president. Then the new president won, so he had to get rid of everybody that was a threat to his administration, and that's how my family moved out.
The immigration story is the story of America. That's who we are. And we forget that at our own peril. We should never pretend like the people who are in the country now were always here, or somehow have some kind of privileged entitlement to define ourselves as Americans and exclude other people. We should really make sure that the doors are open.
So, what does it truly mean to be American?
I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still.
The Electric Maid is a small community music center in Takoma Park run by these two guys who host musical events all through the year. It's pretty small, so there's not a ton of people you can fit in there, which means that when you're performing, you're really close to the audience is really close to you, and it's a really comfortable place to perform music. The Electric Maid itself as an institution is designed to kind of help local musicians perform and have a place to perform. And Takoma Park is a very musician-friendly kind of area, so it's a cool place to kind of group together.
It's a non-governmental community third space. It's not so much, although we do shows, it's really intended as a gathering place.
Electric Maid really wants to cultivate like an atmosphere that's really encouraging for students to come out and try new things and test their limits in music.
The Electric Maid is kind of a cozier atmosphere, and it's like a much more inviting way to begin to sing as a musician and to just kind of be there with like your friends and then some people you don't know and begin to learn how to perform.
It's a place for people to get together and converse and interact with each other, but actual getting together and talking. We're trying to support community in the local area, and that's what we're all about.
You're close to musicians, like emotionally, because you tend to be their friends, but also just you're physically close to the musicians, and that's really cool and very different from performing in like a high school auditorium or like a big auditorium. And I think that gives you a much closer relationship with the musicians who are performing and allows you it's hearing music in a different way. And when you perform in big groups, they put you in big performance spaces, and that's really intimidating, and they invite 400 people to come watch you, and that's really intimidating. And the Electric Maid is a much better place for me to do things like perform music I wrote and to kind of experiment with music, because the stakes aren't as high. It's a good place to kind of explore music.
Basically, we're trying to keep willing and pay our rent, stay here, and act as a community service for youth. People are sorting themselves into these groups, and we want to have a whole community.
I think the Electric Maid builds a sense of community by encouraging everyone in Takoma Park and from around Takoma Park to come out and support each other. And so it builds kind of a network between different performers and students and adults that support them too. So the Electric Maid, it's free, so it doesn't bring in money for the performers, and it's based only on donations. But it does allow performers to get more comfortable in performing.
I have been here nearly 20 years, and I'm as or more enthusiastic about this place than I've ever been. And, we would love to see it go on.
I try to reach out to student performers at Blair and other high schools and schedule them at the Electric Maid on shows that are typically on Friday nights. We try to have like one every month, but sometimes it doesn't work out because of lack of interest. Another thing I do is I try to coordinate donations and fundraising and stuff, but that largely happens during the show itself in a big plastic jar.
If you want to help out, you can email me at either booking@electricmaid.org or more properly, volunteer@electricmaid.org. We meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and we're always looking for volunteers, and we'd love to have more people.